bit just previously. And Barnabas went out to Tarsus to look for Saul. So he's going to southern Turkey there. And finding him, he brought him to Antioch. For a whole year they gathered together a church there and taught a huge crowd. And that's where the disciples were first called Christians. So again, once more in the 40s, in Antioch, either the one in southern Turkey or the one in northern Syria, they're first called Christians. And in those days, prophets, here's comes supernatural material now, prophets came down to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to Antioch. One named Agabus rose up from among them. Now I'm laughing because I don't believe any prophet ever existed called Agabus. And I think this is another garbling, and I'll tell you who Agabus is in a moment. And that this is, to my mind, the sloppiness of the writer of some of this material. You say, you know, you're being really harsh here. Yeah, I'm harsh because most, as Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And most of this material has been left unexamined for 2,000 years. And, you know, seriously unexamined. So, oh, wait, mean we're in Long Beach in the middle of nowhere, we're examining it seriously? Well, I hate to confide to you that unfortunately it's not our fault, but in large measure it's true that it's only a few places around the world this material is examined seriously, and Long Beach unfortunately or fortunately is one of them. Now, that's certainly an egocentric statement, and I apologize for it, but there's nothing else that I can say. And it can't be that people haven't looked at this stuff seriously. No, they never have. And if you look at any of your textbooks anywhere about this episode, you will find no historical analysis of it. You'll find redaction criticism, form criticism, but no historical criticism. And that's the key. Now, look at this. Prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch, and one named Agabus rose up from among them and showed by the Spirit that a great famine was going to come over the whole world. Well, obviously it didn't come over the whole world, but this is the famine we're talking about in Josephus. And what's the result of this famine that Agabus is proclaiming down in Antioch? Paul and Barnabas will be sent up to Jerusalem with famine relief funds. Just like Queen Helen and her son are sent up, but it's Queen Helen who has the means to do this. My conclusion is going to be that Paul and Barnabas are among Queen Helen's famine relief representatives. Now that's what my conclusion, I know it's a jump, but I'll give you one other reason for thinking that. And this happened in the time of Claudius Caesar. Okay, that's the same as Josephus. Remember it mentioned Claudius Caesar in those notes that we were talking about, and every one of the disciples decided to send relief to the brothers living in Judea, which they did, sending it by the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul. Okay? Now, chapter 12. At that time, Herod the king stretched out his hand to do evil to some of those of the church. We don't hear about the famine relief mission. And he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. To my mind, that's the parallel to the killing of Theudas, the beheading of Theudas. That we have also related to the famine relief episode. There's a sequentiality here, but things are transformed into something else. You say, oh, you see, now James, the brother of John, is disappeared, then is gotten rid of, and the rest is how Peter escapes from prison. This is supposed to be the famine relief episode. We don't hear anything about it. And then, what we suddenly hear in line 12. That Peter goes to the house of Mary, but she's not the mother of Jesus. She's the mother of someone we never heard of, John Mark, where they were all gathered. And Peter knocked at the door, and some ladies take his message. And finally he says, line 17, "Go tell these things to James and the brothers," and left and went to another place. What? Who's James? He was never introduced to us. We didn't know who he is. How come he was never introduced to us? Oh, he must be the other James. Oh no, the other James has been eliminated here at the beginning of the chapter. Ah, the true history is bubbling through, which shows that much of what came before is overwritten obfuscation, because the election of James as leader of the early church is totally ignored in the story of Acts, just as his death is. You say, well, why do they bother letting him emerge here? Because they couldn't avoid it. But they didn't tell you who he was and what his doctrine and positions were. He, according to Galatians, as I read you, is the party of the circumcision. Which James is it? James, the brother of Jesus. There's still obfuscation here. But why does Peter go to the house of Mary, the mother of John Mark, to leave a message for James, the brother of Jesus? Because it isn't Mary, the mother of John Mark's house. It's Mary, the mother of James's house. That's why. You don't go to Mary, the mother of John Mark's house, to leave a message for James and the other brothers. Why doesn't the book of Acts want to tell it, or say it that way now? You know, you'll have to decide if this is correct. Why doesn't the book of Acts want to tell it? Because the book of Acts is Pauline. And the James party is totally, and the Pauline approach is totally antithetical to the James party. And it certainly doesn't want to admit that Mary had any other sons except Jesus. And so on and so forth and so on. So there's a good reason. Okay, forget all that. This chapter goes on, and Herod dies. That's also from Josephus. He's eaten up by worms or something, but he's posturing in a theatrical way.
What kind of worm?
Ask the book of Acts. And then, line 25. But the word of God grew and multiplied, and Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem, having completed their mission, also bringing with them John Mark. That's why John Mark's mother was mentioned here. What? Well, what happened to the mission? What happened to the mission? They went and they came back, but in between is all this other interesting stuff. All right, I'm saying that there's a lot of worrisome material all around the episodes that I just read to you there. And one last thing, Agabus. He will appear later in Acts as the prophet who grabs Paul's girdle, ties it in a knot in Caesarea, and tells him not to go up to Jerusalem because there's plotting against him up there. How many people are familiar with that episode? Chapter 21. Okay, but there's another story that Eusebius tells us that he took from the chancery records of, guess what, the city of Edessa, Antioch by Calero. And that's the conversion of a king called Agabus. Agabus. A-G-B-A-R-U-S. And he calls him the great king of the peoples beyond the Euphrates. The great king of the peoples beyond the